Hey everybody, and welcome to another episode of the Devin Shanahan Show. So today we're going to talk about the election, of course, because it is still up in the air. Now, it does look like that at the end of all of this, Biden will probably become the president of the United States, but we do not know yet. There are many cases or many states, I should say, that have some legal court cases surrounding them, and there is still a lot up in the air about that surrounding these court cases. So, it is still possible for Donald Trump to win, but it is not likely. He has a huge mountain to climb of insurmountable odds, essentially, with claiming enough court cases and winning enough court cases to affect enough votes to change the results of the election. So, I mean, I believe right now, as it stands, if you look at all of the votes and if you assume that all the votes are legal and none of them are changed or thrown out by any sort of court case, Joe Biden wins 306 to 232. Yes, that is it. 306 to 232 right now. So, assuming that Donald Trump is able to, through court cases, to change the results of Georgia and Pennsylvania, he would still need one more state because that would only put him at 268 electoral votes and Biden at 270. So, even with Pennsylvania and Georgia flipping, Donald Trump still needs to flip another state. And it's just highly unlikely at this point. I mean, he has the entire government establishment against him, even Fox News and even a lot of Republicans at this point. And there are conflicting reports out there that even if he does win some of the large Pennsylvania court cases, even if he does win these, that they do not affect enough votes for the results to change, essentially. So, I mean, essentially, what Donald Trump would have to do is he would have to prove an enormous amount of coordinated fraud on the effort of the Democrats in order to change this election. Now, I have an interesting theory, an interesting shower thought, so to say, surrounding that. There has been talk of a potential military coup. There have been rumors, mainly coming from the left, of people saying, "Oh, Donald Trump is setting up for a military coup. He threw out the Secretary of Defense, and he's now getting ready to hold a military coup, and that's why he's doing it. He's getting rid of all the people who will not support his coup, and putting in people who are, Trump supporters or super pro Trump. They'll do whatever they want. They'll take their marching orders and go with it and help him with the military coup." Now, I do not believe that. I believe that the odds of that happening are extremely low. But I have an interesting thought on that. But I'll bring that up later, right? I'll bring that up for you guys kind of at the end, right? So listen in all the way through to the end, and you'll get that. But let's jump right in. Let's read the news. We got a lot of topics to talk about. So got an article here from the Daily Wire. Previously unimaginable. Alito criticizes coronavirus restrictions, warns religious liberty becoming disfavored right. Justice Samuel Alito characterized lingering local and state coronavirus lockdowns Thursday as a, quote, constitutional stress test that are placing restrictions on liberty that were, quote, previously unimaginable. Quote, "We have never before seen restrictions as severe, extensive, and prolonged," Alito said in a virtual speech to the Federalist Society, according to the Associated Press. He added that the lockdowns have introduced, quote, previously unimaginable restrictions on individual liberty. Stressing his belief that the coronavirus is a real public health emergency, Alito went on to emphasize that the lockdowns are testing the limits of constitutional freedoms and bringing to the surface the trends that have been percolating long before the pandemic, and warned that such measures must be kept from becoming a, quote, recurring feature after the pandemic has passed. I cannot tell you how much I agree with what Justice Alito is saying here. If we go back in history and we look at all the catastrophic things that have happened to America, and any time that the government has had to step up and take some sort of emergency power or done something that they usually don't during normal times, like for example this coronavirus, the governments are stepping up and they're implementing all sorts of lockdowns. They are using their emergency powers to essentially take complete control of the government, top down control, and, essentially put in place these things under the guise of, helping get rid of the coronavirus and save lives, which is true. They are trying to help get rid of the coronavirus and they are trying to save lives. And I think that's all fine and dandy. But the problem is that when you open the door to giving these governments this top down control and this much power, not once in the history of this country, or probably in the history of any country, not once has these powers of the government been rescinded after the emergency is gone. So, I mean, for example, like, we're giving the governments the complete power to tell us to lock down and to wear masks and where we can go, when we can go out to eat, when we can't, and we have to stay in our house, all these things. Who's to say that when coronavirus is over, they're going to take that back and they're going to say we can come out and, don't have to wear masks? No, they're going to keep using that to tell us what we can do. What if we have a bad flu season next year? Just the normal flu, not coronavirus, just normal flu. Do they think that now that since they've told us to, essentially have these lockdowns during coronavirus, do you think they'll be able to, they might think that, oh, well, we can tell people to lock down now because of the flu too. It's a really good example of things like this is, all these stimulus checks, these stimulus payments and stimulus programs, which I do not believe in at all. I think that it is a false premise that the government essentially printing out money or taxing people and giving that money to, citizens. I think that that is not stimulus. I do not think that the government can provide stimulus. I think it is a completely false premise. I believe 100% in the free market, and it's an entirely false premise when you're printing off this money and are $27 trillion in debt as a country. Like, we don't have the money to be doing this, but somehow we are, right? One thing you got to understand, and if you take anything away from the show, is that anything that any dollar spent by the government, whether it comes from printing off money or from taxes or from loans from other countries, all of that eventually it becomes a tax. It always does. So, when the government is, giving these people these $1,200 checks for coronavirus stimulus, or, upping the unemployment and giving people $600 extra dollars a month to live, that we're going to have to pay for that eventually. Like, and that is one thing that I strongly disagreed with Trump on, was his fiscal policy. He was not a fiscal conservative. He actually increased the federal budget and the federal deficit spending by more than any president in the history of the United States. And that was one thing he ran on. One thing he ran on was shrinking that federal deficit, shrinking government spending, shrinking government programs and the size of government. And he failed. I mean, he added $7 trillion to the national debt in 1 year, in literally this past year. Now, granted, there was coronavirus, but I mean, we've had crises in this country before. I mean, we had World War I, we had World War II. We spent a ton of money on those wars, and we didn't. It wasn't from debt. The money that we spent on those wars was savings. Back then, back in the day, people saved their money. People were prepared. We had a good economy. We were on the gold standard. We knew what we were doing. We weren't inflation. We didn't have crazy amounts of inflation. We weren't borrowing tons of money from China and allowing them to use it as essentially as like a political pry bar to, they essentially have a bunch of leverage because they have a bunch of loans. But I mean, it's just bad news, right? And who's to say that after all of this coronavirus ends, that the Democrats are going to stop giving people money? No. What they're going to do is they're going to say, oh, well, this has worked so well, giving all these people these checks to stay at home, that they're going to use this as an excuse to usher in socialism and keep those powers there and to keep giving people these money, to keep sending out these checks. I mean, Bernie Sanders said it. He said the quiet part out loud. He said that, this is working so well, maybe we should just kind of turn this into a universal basic income. This is it's just insane, like people, giving people money. It doesn't work like that. Money represents the time and the value of your labor. You've put your time, you've put your labor and your skill into something, and someone gives you money as essentially as a representation of that. But if you're just giving someone money for doing nothing, that money really has no value at that point. It's not actual stimulus. That person is getting money for doing nothing, for not actually adding any benefit to society or producing any goods or producing anything of value. So, yeah, I completely agree with Alito here, though, talking about, these all these restrictions, these lockdowns, these mask mandates, everything like this. It's all completely unconstitutional. You shouldn't be able to force the American people to do anything like this. Now, that does not mean that I think that wearing masks is bad. No, I think that wearing masks is good under proper circumstances. For example, if you are around someone, if you're out in public, right, and you can't social distance, then you should be wearing a mask. I mean, that's just not only is it, the science goes back and forth, right, on whether or not masks are good, but it can't hurt, right? So you might as well just go out and wear your mask in public if you can't social distance. It's, even if you don't believe that it's doing anything, it's a common courtesy to other people, when you're out in a public place. When you're in your own home, I don't think you have to wear your mask, but maybe you have maybe maybe you have someone in your family who has a pre-existing condition or is very old. Maybe you're having like your grandma, your great grandma over for dinner one night. Then if you can't social distance from her, or they're in one of those categories where coronavirus affects them, much at a much higher rate than other, or is much more lethal to them than to the average human, then maybe wear your mask around them. That's good. That's all fine and dandy. But two things can be true at once, and that's that lockdowns, restrictions, and mask mandates are unconstitutional, and at the same time, mask wearing might be helpful, right? They're not those things can both be true at once. You can agree that mask wearing is a helpful thing, and also that you don't want someone mandating that you wear a mask. I mean, the country was founded on freedom, and to force people to do things is just completely un-American, and in my opinion, it's completely immoral as well. But so it's nice to hear Justice Samuel Alito come out and say this, because he's a pretty quiet justice. He doesn't come out and say too much to the media every once in a while. Unlike John G. Roberts, he's always trying to get in front of a camera. You can find him wherever a camera is. But yeah, so it's nice to hear from Alito. He's one of the better justices on the court. So let us go on. Look at this article from the Gateway Pundit. Watch. Computer science professor warned about voting machine security flaws in 2017. All right, so we got a little video here. Let's just play the video. We'll listen in. We'll talk about it a little bit, and then we'll move on. Let's go.
Our democracy. My research is in software verification, computer security, technology policy, and election machinery. As I will explain, I strongly recommend that, at a minimum, the Congress seek to ensure the elimination of direct recording electronic voting machines, sometimes called touchscreen machines. Installing new software in a voting machine is not really much different from installing new software in any other kind of computer. Installing new software is how you hack a voting machine to cheat. In 2009, in the courtroom of the Superior Court of New Jersey, I demonstrated how to hack a voting machine. I wrote a vote-stealing computer program that shifts votes from one candidate to another. Installing that vote-stealing program in a voting machine takes 7 minutes per machine with a screwdriver. I did this in a secure facility, and I'm confident my program has not leaked out to affect real elections.
All right, there you go. This is a professor from Princeton, right? And this is what he essentially did. He came out and he's testified before that some of these electronic voting machines are actually very insecure, and due to the nature of, essentially what he's saying is he put some malware, which is a program that does something that's malicious. Essentially, it is what it is, right? It's like a computer virus for layman's terms. For those of you people who are not extremely familiar with computer stuff, it's essentially a virus, right? And he said that it's pretty easy to hack these electronic voting machines. Now, I'm not saying this is what happened in the 2020 election, but it's something that should be thought about. And if there is any, circumstantial evidence or evidence of any kind leading anyone to suppose that this may have happened in 2020, then that needs to be investigated. We need to have transparency. Like I've said every single time that I am talking on this show, we need to have transparency, because it is the minimum requirement for people trusting in the democratic process. And I mean, that's kind of what the Democrats don't want. They don't want transparency. I mean, they're saying that Trump filing all these countersuits is like Hitler or something. Like he doesn't want democracy just because he's filing suits about the election. That is complete bogus. I mean, you should be able to file suits about whatever you want, and everyone should want to get to the bottom of everything. You would think that the Democrats would say, yeah, file all your suits, because, once we get through all the lawsuits and Biden is still won, then everyone can sleep tight knowing that, the process was done correctly. But, I mean, I don't know. The reason I brought this article up is because there were some reports that some of these states using this Dominion software had a problem of, like, they had 6,000 votes that were just switched, and it was some sort of error. But it was interesting because people who were working at these ballot counting locations actually found that they testified that they had a software update at the exact, at 3 a.m. or something during the poll counting. And that's very interesting. Maybe, it's not evidence of anything, but maybe they should go check and see what that software update was about, because you should not be updating software like this, not critical infrastructure software for, voting machines, for the presidential election, mind you, the most important election in the entire world, essentially. Like this is the most important day in politics in the entire United States of America, and possibly the entire country. It affects so much, and You're telling me this voting company, this voting software company doesn't have their stuff enough together? They have to push an update during the counting? You've got to be kidding me. That is insane. They got to get their stuff together. What is going on? But, maybe that should be audited. Maybe we should figure out what's going on there. I'm not saying it's proof of anything, but it's a little bit suspicious, right? Let's go on. Got another video here. Another one from the Gateway Pundit. It's happening. Sidney Powell calls to, quote, release the Kraken. Now, Sidney Powell is a lawyer. She's a very good lawyer. And she's also kind of like a TV personality, things like that. But let's talk about this. She's helping Trump out a lot with some of these suits around voting. So
it's been
see what's going on
organized and conducted with the help of Silicon Valley people, the big tech companies, the social media companies, and even the media companies. And I'm going to release the Kraken.
She is talking about, Lou Dobbs asked her essentially about, the government and media establishment trying to steal the election from Donald Trump.
Release the Kraken!
And this is what she said.
Oh, absolutely. And it's been organized and conducted with the help of Silicon Valley people, the big tech companies, the social media companies, and even the media companies. And I'm going to release the Kraken.
Release the Kraken!
And then they have this silly little crappy thing she put at the end here, which we don't really care about.
Organized and...
But yeah, you get it. So Sidney Powell's going after him. Sidney Powell's a very credible person, so I would find it hard to believe that she was going out on the news and saying all these statements with utter sincerity if she was not, certain that there was at least some evidence. I don't think she would throw away her reputation like that. But you never know, right? So we got another article here from the Gateway Pundit. This one is not a video. This one we're going to read. Shocking exclusive. We caught them. Pennsylvania results show a statistically impossible pattern behind Biden's steal. We caught them again. And here's another. We caught them. We caught their fraud. And in this post tonight, our first of many will reveal how they stole the battleground states. The fix is in. The current results of the presidential election in Pennsylvania reported to the public are fraudulent because they are nearly statistically impossible. And let's get into it. Here we go. Here's the meat of the article. That was a bunch of titles. They had a ton of titles, and they kept saying, we caught them. It's kind of weird. Gateway Pundit has a weird writing style. Their editor might need to be fired, might need to be replaced. Just saying. Let's go on. President Trump was ahead of Joe Biden by nearly 700,000 votes. It was an insurmountable lead. The president was still ahead in Pennsylvania with 56% of the vote to Biden's 43% the next morning. The president was winning Pennsylvania and held a 675,000 vote lead in the election over Joe Biden. That is in Pennsylvania alone. According to what happened next was corrupt and criminal as the Democrats went about to steal Pennsylvania for Biden. They took a Trump landslide and they criminally flipped it to Joe Biden. According to Pennsylvania's election returns website, on Election Day, President Trump won nearly 2/3 of all votes cast in the state. President Trump won 2.7 million votes compared to Biden's 1.4 million votes. The president's votes were nearly twice as many as Joe Biden's, but what happened next was shocking. Pennsylvania began counting ballots by mail. There was no reporting on how many votes were outstanding at the end of election night. There was no reporting ever that we are aware of where the state announced how many votes were left to count after the election. They just kept coming and they just kept counting. The state also allowed votes to come in for 3 more days after the election. Of course, these were all mail-in ballots. We do not know how many mail-in votes came in during these 3 days. The Republicans were not allowed to observe the counting of these votes, even though a court order was in place demanding that the state so. These actions go against Pennsylvania's Constitution in which the state, so we have talked about this a bunch. Article 2, Section 1 of the Constitution says that the state legislature has the power to set voting laws. So essentially the state voting laws in Pennsylvania are that if a ballot, it doesn't matter if it's a mail-in ballot or a provisional ballot or a ballot cast on Election Day, if it does not arrive at the polling location by 8 p.m. on Election Day, then it cannot be counted. Period. End of story. Nothing else matters. And the Supreme Court of Pennsylvania went behind the backs of the state legislature and said, oh, well, we're going to allow 3 more extra days on that because of coronavirus. Last time I checked, which was very recently, Article 2, Section 1 of the Constitution does not say that some sort of virus or pandemic or some sort of national emergency means that you can go behind the backs of the state legislature. It doesn't say that. It doesn't say that at all. And it looks like the Supreme Court is going to take up this case. And, Alan Dershowitz came out a few days ago and he said that he thinks Donald Trump will win this case. And Alan Dershowitz is a Democrat. I mean, well, he's a liberal, right? So he's like a Democrat from like 20 years ago. Obviously the Democratic Party has pushed so far to the left now that they're essentially the party of Marxism and socialism. But I mean, he is definitely not a conservative Republican, right-leaning guy. He's at best in the middle, right? He's kind of like middle left, like a classical liberal. But and I mean, he thinks Donald Trump, if he thinks that if this case goes to the case about, accepting mail-in ballots after 8 p.m. on election day, he thinks that if that goes to the Supreme Court, then Donald Trump will win. And I tend to agree. I mean, we have a conservative majority on the court, and not to mention Article 2, Section 1 lays it out pretty clear. For those of you who haven't listened to one of my shows where I talk about Article 2, Section 1, you can go back and watch them. I talk about it pretty much all the time, but we'll talk about it right here, right? I'll pull it up. It should be pretty easy to pull up on Google here. Article 2, Section 1. The executive branch. Article 2, Section 1, here we go. Clause 2. Each state shall appoint, in such manner as the legislature thereof may direct, a number of electors. You don't need to read the rest. It's literally, the part about it is literally right here in this first line. Each state shall appoint in a manner in such manner as the legislature thereof may direct, a number of electors. So it's clear right here. Let me break it down. Let me break it down to the less words, right? Take all those bogus words out that don't mean anything. The legislature may direct a number of electors. Each state shall appoint a number of electors in which the legislature shall direct. So essentially what that means is the legislature will direct and make the laws, direct the manner of how these electors are selected, which means they set election law, essentially. So I do think Donald Trump will win that case if it's brought to the Supreme Court. The question is, how many ballots were received after 8 p.m.? It would have to be quite a few. I don't know how many, I don't know by how many votes. I don't know by how many votes Joe Biden is up right now. I think it's around 40 to 50,000, but that means at least 25,000 of these ballots would need to be flipped, right? And if it's just getting thrown out, not flipped, then all of, 50,000 ballots would have to be thrown out. I've heard reports that only 10,000 ballots arrived after 8 p.m. on election day. So it might not be enough, right? It might just not be enough. There might not be enough votes affected by these election laws to do anything about the election for Trump or to change any results. And even if he does change Pennsylvania, he also has to change 2 other states, assuming that one of them is Georgia. If one of them isn't Georgia, he has to change like 3 other states maybe. So, I mean, it's just a big mess. We never should have let it go this far, like I said in a few episodes ago on my show, I said that, John G. Roberts, he had a case ahead of him in front of the Supreme Court about, whether or not they were going to allow the Pennsylvania Supreme Court to go behind the backs of the legislature unconstitutionally and to allow these extra 3 days to accept ballots. And John G. Roberts essentially said, no, we're not going to take this case because we can't get involved in the matter of the states, which is absolutely absurd because it is not a state matter. It's a matter of the Constitution. This is exactly when the Supreme Court should step in, but he didn't. He decided to put it aside, and this is what caused this whole problem in the first place. He could have stepped up and made a ruling a couple of months ago, and we wouldn't be here today. We wouldn't be here. We wouldn't have all these lawsuits. We wouldn't have anything. We wouldn't have people freaking out, and we wouldn't have 71 million people in the country thinking that the election is illegitimate and being stolen from them. John G. Roberts is a fraud. He's a hack. He's not a conservative. Bush never should have appointed him. He's been a complete failure and a complete letdown as a Supreme Court justice. That's why I'm glad we got Amy Coney Barrett in. I'm not so happy about Kavanaugh. I mean, it's much better than a leftist judge, but I mean, Kavanaugh's shaping out to be a John G. Roberts Jr. It's just, or John G. Roberts II or whatever. It's bad. It's bad news. Let's go on. I got one more article here from the Epoch Times, and we're going to talk a little bit about the current state of the election, in terms of what states have recounts, what states have lawsuits, and all that goodness, right? And then I'm going to leave you for the rest of the weekend. But let's go. Article here from the New York Times. Quote, never bet against me. Trump confident he'll get to 270 electoral college votes. President Donald Trump, in a new interview, said he is confident that he will get to 270 electoral college votes when all legal challenges, canvasses, audits, and recounts are resolved. Trump told the Washington Examiner that he heard many people tell him that he should concede in recent days, but he's going to continue to fight. Now, you can watch like MSNBC or CNN or even Fox News, and they're all urging the president to concede. Where in the Constitution, where in any federal law does it say that you have to concede? You don't. You do not have to concede. And why would you concede when there are still open court cases and lawsuits challenging the results of some of these elections? Why would you concede? It doesn't matter. Joe Biden's over there. He's having friggin' like presser events, and he's got signs behind him that say the office of the president-elect. Are you crazy? Are you an insane person, Joe Biden? I mean, we know he's an insane person. We know he has like dementia or something at least, because half the time he doesn't know where he is. But I mean, there is no office of the president-elect, Joe Biden. You were the vice president, and you've been in government for 47 years, and you don't know that there's no office? There's no such thing as the office of the president-elect? This guy's just making crap up. He's the one who's acting like a fascist, standing up there and acting like he's already president of the United States when he is not. You know, even if Trump does concede, he's still the president for 90 more days. Get over yourself, Joe Biden. This is crazy, and the left needs to get over themselves, too. It doesn't matter if President Trump concedes or not. When we have the Electoral College and when they convene in December 14th and when they pick a new president, it doesn't matter. When come Inauguration Day, it does not matter if Donald Trump has conceded. Either Donald Trump will remain president if he got the 270 electoral votes, or Joe Biden will become the new president and get sworn in on Inauguration Day. It doesn't matter if President Trump concedes or not. We're still waiting on Hillary Clinton to concede 4 years later. Who will concede first, Donald Trump or Hillary Clinton? I butchered her name there. Hillary Clinton. What a great figure. I do not like her, ladies and gentlemen. Let's go on. He issued a lighthearted warning to people, telling him there is no hope. Quote, never bet against me. We're going to win in Wisconsin, Trump told the Examiner. Quote, Arizona, it'll be down to 8,000 votes. Even if we can do an audit of the millions of votes, we'll find 8,000 votes easy. If we can do an audit, we'll be in good shape there. And in Georgia, he said, quote, we're going to win because now we're down to 10,000, 11,000 votes, and we have hand counting. Quote, Trump was responding to an announcement made by the Georgia Secretary of State's office that a full manual recount will be carried out. Quote, hand counting is the best. To do a spin of the machine doesn't mean anything. You pick up 10 votes. But when you hand count, I think we're going to win Georgia, he added to the paper. In Michigan and Pennsylvania, the campaign's legal strategy is focusing on protesting the exclusion of GOP observers during critical time periods during vote counting, Trump said. Quote, they wouldn't let our poll watchers or observers watch or observe, Trump added. That's a big thing. They should throw those votes out that went through during these periods of time when Trump observers weren't there. We went to court and the judge ordered the observers back, but that was after 2 days, and millions of votes could have gone through. Millions. We're down to 50,000. The Secretaries of State of Pennsylvania and Michigan have denied allegations from the Trump's team and Republicans that observers were not allowed there. Now, you know, you're seeing conflicting reports. You know, some news networks are saying, yes, observers were allowed, and some are saying, no, they weren't. And, you know, there's a bunch of videos of observers being kicked out of these places, and, you know, like, essentially these ballot counters, like, putting paper and, like, cardboard things up over the windows so that observers can't see in. So there's a bunch of conflicting reports, right? I don't really know what to make of it. Like, you see things online, you see videos, you see people complaining, you see people saying they were kicked out. You know, you just don't know who to trust these days. I'm certainly not trusting the mainstream media, you know, or the establishment media. I certainly cannot trust them. I practically can't trust anything that I can't see with my own two eyes these days, but I mean, even then, it's a little sketchy. But, you know, I don't know. We're just going to have to let the Trump legal team, you know, gather all the evidence they can and present it to these courts and hope that these courts rule, you know, constitutionally, or, you know, rule and follow the state laws. And essentially, we have to hope that these courts make ethical rulings and are not political hacks for any side, for the Republican side or for the Democratic side. I mean, our faith now essentially has to be in the courts. And, you know, I have my doubts, but I mean, I don't know. I mean, we'll see, right? We'll see how these court cases play out. And I hope that everything's made public after it, because then we can at least know what happened. We can know, you know, what evidence there was or what evidence there wasn't. And then everyone can hopefully sleep well at the end of this. But unfortunately, I think this problem has already gotten so far that, you know, I think no matter what happens, a lot of people are going to have completely lost faith and trust in the democratic system in this country, and it's just not good. We're going to need some sort of voting reform after this to make it so that people can trust the results, because, you know, we're going to have a big problem when 70 million people don't accept the results of the election. That's a big problem. So, but who knows? You know, so at the beginning of the show, let's talk about this first. Then we'll talk about my little food for thought, my little shower thought I said I was going to tell you at the end of the show. So, you know, here we stand in terms of the current election, right? So currently, if you take into account that there are lawsuits and recounts in 6 different states, the current numbers are Donald Trump with 232 electoral votes and Joe Biden with 227. So Nevada has lawsuits, Arizona has lawsuits, Michigan has lawsuits, and Pennsylvania have lawsuits. Then we have Wisconsin and Georgia doing a recount. I believe Wisconsin is just doing a regular recount, and Georgia is doing a full hand recount. So that's where we technically stand, right, on the And then every other state has been called, essentially. The state legislatures haven't certified the results yet, but they're going to, because there's nothing going on in the other states. There's no lawsuits or anything like that. So, I mean, that's where we currently stand. I know the media already has, like, all these other states blue, and they're calling it like that, and it may very well end up like that, but that is not where we currently stand. Where we currently stand is here. And, that's why Donald Trump has not conceded, because do you see a number that's 270 up there? No, I don't either. It's pretty obvious. Joe Biden only has 227. He very well may have 270 or 306 if all these were blue. He very well may have that, but he doesn't yet. Not a single state in the entire union has certified their results yet, the results of the election. Not a single state. So, I mean, it would be inappropriate for Donald Trump to concede. Al Gore and George Bush didn't concede in 2000. So. But yeah, that's all I got. So I'm gonna move on to my little shower thought that I said I was gonna let you guys go with. I'm gonna state that. I'm gonna let you guys know, give you something to think about over the weekend. Then I'm gonna leave you for the weekend, essentially. So, I was thinking about this. What if Donald Trump has overwhelming circumstantial evidence, or maybe his campaign or his administration and maybe some of the intelligence officials that he works with, maybe they have tons of like circumstantial evidence that, or, have heard through the grapevine that the election was stolen in some way, maybe by using this Hammer and Scorecard software, CIA software. If you don't know about Hammer and Scorecard, go check out my video. It was done a few days ago. It's literally called Hammer and Scorecard. It's also a podcast. Every video I do is also a podcast, just so you guys know. Go check that out. It explains it pretty well. It's a short one too. Or you can go check out Mary Fanning at theamericanreport.org. She does excellent reporting on that topic. But so what if Donald Trump has like overwhelming circumstantial evidence that the election is being stolen and a fraud is being done on the American people, but he just can't prove it in these courts? What if there's no hard evidence? Like, what if the fraud against the American people was done so well that they didn't leave behind any evidence, which is certainly possible? Then, that kind of puts Donald Trump, and this is my shower thought, this is my thing you guys should think about over the weekend. That kind of puts Donald Trump in an odd position. If that's the case, should he concede to Biden? Or should he just remain in power and try to stay in power because he knows that to do otherwise would be a fraud on the American people? It's a tough position. You put you in a rock and a hard place. And I'm not saying that's what's happening. I'm not saying that is, the odds of that happening are very low. But I think that if he is in that position, Donald Trump would probably choose to like use the military and essentially stage a coup to stay in power, because he would think that that's the right thing, right? Because if there was a fraud done on the American people and Donald Trump should be president, I mean, you certainly could make an argument that Donald Trump should remain in power by all means necessary. But you don't know, right? Like, it's just something to think about, right? So I'm not saying that that's happening, and I'm not even saying that I would support Donald Trump if that were the case. I think that, I think if he does hold some sort of coup and tries to stay in power because he truly does believe that there's a fraudulent election going on and he truly believes that it is stolen, then, I'm not going to support him through that unless he provides all the evidence, and it is completely overwhelming evidence that the election was stolen. If the election was completely stolen and there was overwhelming evidence, then I will support him staying in power no matter what. But I mean, it's just something to think about, right? Maybe that's what's going on. Maybe Trump has, Trump's the most powerful person in the world. So maybe he's already seen all the evidence and he knows. And, maybe we'll find out. Maybe some of these court cases and he's filing some of these suits, maybe some of this evidence will come out and we'll figure it all out. And we won't have to go down that road. But if we don't, it's interesting, right? It's very interesting. It's just something to think about. But as I say at every show, guys, and every podcast, if you like what I'm talking about, like it, share it, subscribe, tell your friends about it. If you got any conservative people, any conservative family members, girlfriend, boyfriend, mom, dad, whatever, right? Friends, coworkers, peers, anybody, neighbors, whoever you're talking to. If you get some conservative people, tell them to check out the Devin Shanahan show. Tell them I'm on YouTube if they want to watch. Tell them I'm on every podcast provider. I'm on Apple, I'm on Google, I'm on Spotify, I'm on everything. Anything you want, Stitcher, Pocket Cast, whatever. I'm everywhere. I'm all over the place, guys. But yeah, that's all I got for you guys. You guys have an excellent weekend. I might be posting some more shows later on in the weekend, but if not, I'll probably see you guys Monday. Thanks. Have a good one, guys. Bye.